When my daughter-in-law smashed my dinner plate and told me I wasn't welcome at my own table, I realized some battles aren't fought with words, they're survived with silence. "Oh, you sat at the table without asking for permission." That was the first thing my daughter-in-law said to me that morning, before the sound of porcelain shattering against the tiles drowned out her voice. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe she was joking. Maybe I was still dreaming. But the sting of hot tea across my wrist and the shards of my favorite floral plate scattered at my feet reminded me no, this was real. My daughter-in-law, the woman my son had promised would treat me like her own mother, was standing in my kitchen, her face red, eyes blazing, breathing hard, and looking at me like I was a trespasser in my own home. And all because I'd sat down to have breakfast. I remember the silence that followed. The clinking of glass from the shelf, the low hum of the refrigerator, the faint chirping outside. My fingers trembled as I reached for a napkin, trying to wipe the spilled tea. My heart thudded somewhere deep, behind a wall of disbelief. It wasn't the first time she'd spoken sharply. But this was different. There was something final in her voice, a kind of disdain that cut through the morning air. I didn't say anything then. I just bent down to pick up the broken pieces. I told myself it wasn't worth responding. But inside, something small and tired in me began to ache. Before she came into our lives, mornings in this house used to smell like cardamom and peace. I'd wake early, roll out the dough, hum old songs while kneading, and prepare parathas for my son before he left for work. He always said, "Ma, your cooking is the reason I come home on time." I believed him. We had our little world, quiet, simple, filled with laughter over the smallest things. Then he got married. At first, I tried my best to welcome her. When my son brought her home, she was all grace and warmth, soft voice, eyes full of gratitude. "I've heard so much about you," she said, holding my hands. I saw sincerity there, or at least I thought I did. I gave her my best gold bangles, the ones my husband had given me before he passed. "Your family now," I told her. But somewhere between then and now, something changed. I can't tell when exactly, perhaps after the first few months, when she stopped joining me in the kitchen. Or the day she told my son she preferred ordering food instead of eating oily homemade meals. Or maybe it started when my son began asking me not to interfere so much. Little things, small moments, piling up quietly until they formed this wall between us, a wall I didn't even see being built. That morning, I'd woken up early, as I always did. The house was still half asleep. I made myself tea, the way I've done for decades, 1 spoon of sugar, a touch of ginger, the smell of comfort. I saw the empty dining table, the one I had polished myself when we first moved here. I sat down with my plate, ready to eat. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have waited for her to wake up, to allow me, as she now seemed to expect. But after all, wasn't this still my home? The home I had built, paid for, and kept alive after my husband died? When she came down the stairs and saw me there, I could tell she'd already decided to be angry. The way her eyes darted from the table to my plate, the way her lips tightened before she even spoke. Then came that line-cutting, humiliating, unforgettable. "You sat at the table without asking for permission?" I froze. I wanted to believe she meant something else, that maybe she was talking to someone else. But when her hand swung and the plate flew, when it shattered and the room went silent, I understood there was no misunderstanding. It was pure contempt. My son rushed in seconds later, hair messy, shirt half-buttoned. "What's going on?" he asked. But she was quicker. "She disrespected me," she cried, pointing at me like I was some thief caught in her kitchen. "I told you before, she doesn't listen. She does whatever she wants." I looked at my son, hoping for his eyes to meet mine, to read what really happened. But he didn't. He sighed, rubbed his temples, and said quietly, "Ma, please, let's not start the day with drama." That hurt more than the smashed plate. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to tell him what she'd said, what she'd done. But the words got stuck somewhere deep in my throat. I just nodded and left the room. I heard her voice behind me, sweet again now, cooing to him, "See? I told you she always takes things personally." I went to my room and closed the door. It smelled faintly of sandalwood and old memories. My husband's photo sat on the table, his smile still gentle, eyes full of kindness. I sat in front of it for a long time. "You'd never believe this, would you?" I whispered. I tried to tell myself to stay calm, that maybe she was stressed, maybe it was a bad morning. But the way my son looked at me, like I was a problem to be managed, not his mother, that was what stayed. And for the first time since his wedding, I began to wonder whether I still belonged here. Whether this house still held space for me, or whether I'd already been quietly replaced. That evening, when I came out to make dinner, I found her already in the kitchen, phone in one hand, laughing. The countertop was cluttered with delivery boxes. "Don't bother cooking," she said, without looking at me. "We ordered out. It's easier." I nodded and turned to leave, but she added, "Oh, and next time, just wait before using the dining table. It's awkward when guests see you eating alone like that." Guests. That word lingered in the air. Guests eat at someone else's home. Guests leave. Guests don't belong. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house felt different now, colder. I kept replaying the moment she smashed that plate. The sound echoed in my mind like thunder, sharp and final. But something else echoed too, her words, her tone. And I realized this wasn't just about a plate. It was about control. About territory. About her trying to erase me quietly, one small humiliation at a time. And that was the night I decided I wouldn't let her. Not anymore. After that morning, something inside me shifted, like a curtain had been drawn back, and I could finally see the cracks I'd been pretending weren't there. I started noticing things. Little things. The kind of moments most people would brush aside, but that told quiet truths if you looked close enough. Like how my son's tone changed when he spoke to me, always gentle, but with a new kind of hesitation. Or how my daughter-in-law's smile, once polite and practiced, had started carrying a faint trace of victory every time she caught my eyes and looked away. The air in my own house began to feel monitored. One afternoon, I went to water the plants by the window, my small joy since my husband passed. When I reached for the watering can, I noticed something odd. The family photo that used to sit beside the window, the one of me, my son, and his wife on their wedding day, was gone. In its place was a new frame. Just the two of them. At first I thought maybe it had fallen or broken. I asked her later, gently, "Beta, do you know what happened to the old photo?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, I put it away," she said casually. "It didn't match the decor. I'm doing a minimalist theme now." Minimalist. That word stung. Because what she really meant was, without you. That evening, when my son came home from work, I tried to bring it up. "Do you remember that photo from the wedding?" I asked. "The one that used to be in the living room?" He smiled absently, scrolling through his messages. "Yeah, of course. It's in one of the boxes, I think." "Why?" She replaced it. He looked up then, puzzled. "It's just decor, Ma. Don't take it personally." There it was again, that phrase he'd learned from her. Don't take it personally. It had become their shield, their way of dismissing everything that hurt me. Over the next few weeks, I started to see a pattern. Every time I tried to take part in the house, whether it was arranging the kitchen shelves, folding laundry, or even making tea, she'd find a way to stop me. "Oh, I already did that. Please don't mix the cutlery again." I told the maid to handle it. Small things spoken sweetly, but layered with a quiet insistence, "Stay out of the way." And my son, he didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. One Sunday, I overheard them arguing in their room. Her voice, sharp and low. "She's always there, Arjun. Always hovering. I need space in this house. I can't even breathe." His reply came softer, hesitant. "She's my mother. She doesn't mean harm." "I know," she snapped, "but she doesn't belong in every moment of our life." Belong. That word again. I stood outside the door for a moment, heart pounding. Then I walked away quietly, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought of all the years I'd worked, saved, and sacrificed to build this home, the roof that now apparently didn't have room for me. A few days later, the next clue appeared uninvited. I was cleaning the kitchen drawers when I found a small blue notebook wedged in the back, half covered by a stack of unused napkins. It wasn't mine. The cover was leather, embossed with her initials. I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity, mixed with a mother's instinct, got the better of me. Inside were scribbled notes in her handwriting, lists, plans, reminders. But one page caught my eye. Call real estate agent, discuss valuation. Another line below. Ask Arjun to finalize transfer before she changes her mind. Transfer. My hands went cold. Transfer of what? I read the next line and felt my stomach drop. Title deed, house under joint name, must confirm lawyer's update. I closed the notebook immediately, heart racing. My house. The house my husband and I built together. The one we paid for with 30 years of savings, sweat, and sacrifice. The same house she'd once called so traditional, but cozy. Was she planning to sell it? Transfer it? I waited until evening, pacing the corridor like a ghost in my own home. When my son returned, I told myself I wouldn't accuse, just ask. Calmly. He was taking off his shoes when I said, Arjun, Beta, I found something today. He looked up tired. What now, Ma? I ignored the sharpness in his voice. Your wife's notebook, it mentioned the house and some kind of transfer. Is something happening I don't know about? His face tightened instantly. You went through her things? That's what you took from what I said? I asked quietly. Not that there might be something important about the house? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. It's nothing. We were just exploring the idea of joint ownership. It's better for taxes, Ma. You don't have to worry. Joint ownership. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. But something inside me whispered, no, this isn't just taxes. Because the tone in his voice, defensive, rehearsed, wasn't that of a man discussing finances. It was the tone of someone hiding something. That night, when I went to my room, I looked again at my husband's photo. They're trying to take our home, I whispered. Bit by bit, they're erasing me from it. The next morning, I heard her voice again, this time in the hallway, talking on the phone. Her words came sharp, hurried. Yes, once it's done, she won't even realize until it's too late. I froze. My blood went cold. She was talking about me. I stepped back quietly before she saw me. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid she might hear it through the walls. That was the moment I knew the smashed plate wasn't anger. It was warning. And I had just stepped into something far darker than I'd imagined. It's strange how betrayal doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, like water finding cracks in a wall. By the time you notice the dampness, the damage is already deep inside. That morning, when I heard my daughter-in-law's voice in the hallway, cold, confident, whispering about me as if I were a problem to be solved, something inside me broke. But I needed proof. So I decided to start watching, listening, and keeping notes, the way a mother learns to when she's been ignored too long. Over the next few days, I paid attention. She spent hours on the phone, always lowering her voice when I entered the room. Papers appeared and disappeared from my son's briefcase. Letters came by courier, addressed to him, but she was always the one to sign for them. One afternoon, while she was out meeting a friend, I went into my son's study to tidy up, something I hadn't done in months, because she insisted she'd handle it. The first thing I noticed was the scent, her perfume, strong and sharp, filling the air like ownership. On the desk lay a small stack of papers, neatly clipped together. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But the moment my eyes caught the header, property transfer agreement, my hands began to tremble. I read every word. The house deed, originally in my name, had been amended. My signature, or something that looked like it, appeared at the bottom. The new title listed my son and her as co-owners. And worse, there was a clause, small, hidden in legal phrasing, granting her full control in the event of my voluntary relocation. Voluntary relocation. It sounded so polite, so harmless. But I knew what it meant. If I ever left this house, even for a short time, I'd have no right to return. I sank into the chair, the weight of it pressing against my chest. My throat burned. How could my son, my only son, sign something like this without telling me? When she returned that evening, her mood was unusually cheerful. Ma, would you like some tea? She asked sweetly. You look tired. I looked up at her, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own voice. Did you go somewhere important today? I asked quietly. Her smile froze, just for a moment. Then she shrugged. Just errands. Why? I wanted to scream, to hold up the papers, to demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the instinct to protect my son even from his own mistakes. So I said nothing. Instead, I watched her pour the tea. Her hand was steady, her smile back in place. She looked so calm, so in control. And I realized she believed she'd already won. That night, when my son came home, I tried once more. Arjun, I said softly, can we talk? Just the two of us. He hesitated, glancing toward the living room where she sat watching television. Sure, Ma. What's wrong? I placed the papers on the table. I found these in your study. He froze. His eyes flicked to the documents, then back to me. Where did you get that? In your drawer, I said. It was in plain sight. His shoulders stiffened. Ma, you weren't supposed to see that yet. We were going to tell you once everything was finalized. Finalized? My voice cracked. You mean the house? The one your father and I built? The one I've lived in for 30 years. He rubbed the back of his neck, not meeting my eyes. It's just paperwork. For the future. It's still yours. No, it isn't, I said quietly. Not after this. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he muttered, you're overreacting. This is just how things work now. She's my wife, Ma. We need to secure our future together. And what about mine? I asked. Do I not have one? He looked at me then, and in his eyes, I saw something I never thought I'd see in my son, distance. She's my family now, he said simply. The words hit like a slap. I wanted to remind him that I had carried him in my womb for 9 months, that I'd fed him when I had nothing but rice and salt, that I'd worked double shifts to put him through college. But I didn't. Because the boy I raised wasn't the man standing in front of me anymore. That night, I cried quietly, not because of the property papers, but because I realized I had lost my son long before that document existed. 2 days later, the betrayal became public. I went to the market as usual, greeting the neighbors, buying vegetables. When I returned, 2 of the women from down the street stopped me near the gate. Congratulations, one of them said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Heard your son's making big moves, selling the old house soon? I froze. Selling. They exchanged glances. Oh, you didn't know? I felt the world tilt. My bag slipped from my hands, tomatoes rolling onto the dusty road. When I entered the house, I found her in the living room, laughing softly on the phone. Yes, the papers are almost ready, she said. Once she agrees to move to the senior home, everything will go smoothly. I didn't wait for her to hang up. Who are you talking to? I demanded. Her smile vanished. You shouldn't eavesdrop, Ma. Answer me, I said, my voice trembling. Who are you talking to? She crossed her arms, unbothered. Our lawyer. About the sale. You'll get a nice room at the facility, near the hills. It's peaceful. You'll love it. It took me a moment to understand the words, to realize that she was talking about sending me away, like some burden to be stored neatly out of sight. I stared at her, disbelief turning into a deep, cold anger I hadn't felt in years. How dare you? I whispered. This is my home. My husband's home. You don't get to decide where I live. She leaned back, almost amused. Oh, but I already have. I wanted to scream. To throw something, like she had that plate weeks ago. But instead, I turned and walked to my room. Not because I was defeated, but because I needed to think. And as I sat there, staring at the same old wedding photo she had taken down, one thought kept circling in my mind like a silent vow. If they want to take everything from me, they'll have to face what they've made of me first. That night, I didn't sleep. The walls of this house, the same ones I'd painted with my husband's favorite shade of cream, felt like strangers closing in on me. Every clock tick echoed like an accusation. I sat at my dressing table, watching my reflection in the dim light. The face that looked back wasn't the soft, obedient mother they had come to expect. No, this was a woman who had lost too much to stay silent. I thought of my husband, his laugh, his tired hands, his promise before he passed, no matter what happens, protect our home. And I decided I would. But not with shouting or tears. with calm, deliberate strength, the kind that frightens those who mistake kindness for weakness. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. When my daughter-in-law came into the kitchen, I greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Beta. Breakfast?" She blinked, surprised by my tone. Sure," she said cautiously. I made her favorite parathas, humming softly as the butter sizzled. I even served her first. It wasn't submission, it was strategy. She thought I'd given up. That's what people like her do, they mistake quiet for surrender. While she ate, I slipped away to my room and pulled out the old metal trunk under my bed. Inside were decades of memories, wedding photos, letters, and one envelope that mattered most, the original property documents. My husband had insisted I keep a copy, just in case. That case had come sooner than I'd ever imagined. The document bore the government seal and my husband's signature and mine. I checked the registration number, compared it with the one on the new papers. They didn't match. That meant the ones she'd used were forged. A chill ran through me, not from fear but from realization. I had power again. I spent the next few days gathering quiet allies. The first was Mr. Varma, our old family lawyer. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but when I called, his voice was as gentle as I remembered. "Madam, don't worry," he said after I explained everything. "Bring the documents to me. We'll verify them officially." So I went, dressed neatly in a simple sari, holding the papers close to my chest. He compared both versions carefully, adjusting his glasses. "This signature here," he said, tapping the fake one, "it's not yours. And this seal is outdated, they used an old template. This is a clear forgery." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "What happens now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "We report it to the registrar's office. Quietly. And if your son and his wife proceed with the sale, they'll be the ones in trouble." "Can we keep my name off the record for now?" I asked. "I want to see how far they'll go." He nodded. "Of course. Sometimes silence teaches louder lessons." I left his office feeling lighter, not happy, but anchored. I wasn't helpless anymore. When I returned home that evening, my son and daughter-in-law were sitting together, whispering. They stopped when I entered. "Ma," my son said quickly, "we were just talking about the relocation papers. We'll visit the home this weekend, okay?" I smiled, calm as ever. "Of course, Beta. If you think it's best." She looked pleased, smug, even. "I knew you'd understand, Ma. You'll love the place." I nodded, pouring myself tea. "I'm sure I will." They didn't notice the small recorder on the table, hidden beneath a napkin, capturing every word. That weekend, they insisted on driving me to the facility. It was far from the city, near the hills, as she had promised. The building was clean, yes, but cold, not a home, just a waiting room for forgotten souls. The caretaker, a polite man with a clipboard, smiled at me. "We have a nice room ready for you, ma'am. Your son has already made the deposit." Deposit. The word stung. I turned to Arjun. "You already paid?" He avoided my eyes. "Just to reserve it. In case you liked it." I nodded slowly, the recorder still tucked safely inside my handbag. After the brief tour, I asked to go home. "I just need a few days to pack," I said. She grinned. "Of course, Ma. Take your time." They had no idea they'd already sealed their own fate. The next morning, I went straight to the registrar's office with Mr. Varma. We submitted the forged papers, the audio recording, and the proof of original ownership. He promised a full inquiry. Then, I made one more stop, the local newspaper office. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. A story about elderly women being tricked out of their homes by greedy relatives. "Would you like your name published?" the journalist asked. "Not yet," I said softly. "Let the guilty read it first." Days passed quietly. My son and his wife went about their routines, unaware that the walls around them were tightening. Then, one morning, I heard shouting from the front gate. It was an officer, uniformed, holding official papers. "Mr. Arjun Sharma," he called. "You are under investigation for property fraud. Please cooperate." My son's face drained of color. What's going on?" His wife rushed out, her voice sharp. "There must be some mistake." The officer ignored her, reading aloud. forgery of legal documents, and attempt to unlawfully transfer ownership. I stood in the doorway, calm and silent, as the reality sank in for them. She turned to me then, eyes wild. "You did this." I met her gaze evenly. "No, Beta. You did." As they spoke with the officer, the neighbors gathered outside, whispering. For years, I had been invisible, just the old mother. But that day, they saw me again. And not as weak or pitiful, but as someone who still had dignity, intelligence, and fire. My son wasn't arrested that day, but the humiliation was enough. The house sale was frozen, the documents voided, and their lawyer withdrew representation. She avoided me for days afterward, slamming doors, refusing to speak. My son stayed quiet too, ashamed, perhaps, or lost in the wreckage of his own choices. And me? I cooked, cleaned, and carried on because life, even when scarred, must continue. But deep down, I knew the worst storm was still coming, the moment when everything between mother and son would finally break open. It started with whispers. Neighbors who used to greet us politely began slowing down outside our gate, pretending to adjust their scarves or check their phones just to glance inside. The newspaper article had gone viral. Elderly widow outsmarts family property scam. It didn't name us directly, but everyone in our neighborhood knew who it was about. The timing, the details, they were too specific. That morning, when I stepped out to sweep the porch, Mrs. Mara from next door called softly, "You're brave, Kamla G." Not many mothers would stand up like that. I smiled faintly, saying nothing. Not out of pride, but because the wound was still raw. Inside, tension thickened like heavy air before a monsoon storm. My daughter-in-law, Priya, barely looked at me. She stomped around the house, talking loudly on the phone about false accusations and vindictive people. My son, Arjun, avoided both of us, staying out late and coming home with tired eyes. One evening, I overheard them arguing in their room. "You said it would be easy," he snapped. "How was I supposed to know she had the original papers?" she hissed back. "You told me to sign those forms." "Oh, don't act like a saint, Arjun. You were fine spending the money." Their words sliced through the silence, each one confirming what I already knew. Greed had replaced love in their marriage, and perhaps in my son's heart too. 2 days later, the registrar's office sent a formal notice. They were summoned for questioning, and a financial audit was requested. That same afternoon, our society chairman, a man who loved gossip more than oxygen, arrived at our door. "Arjun Beta," he began, his tone syrupy, "we've received complaints from the housing committee. They're concerned about legal complications. You understand, nah?" Priya's face turned red. "This is harassment. We haven't done anything wrong." The chairman smiled thinly. "Then it should be easy to clear your name." I stood behind them, silent, watching it unfold. For years, I had depended on them. Now, they stood in my house defending themselves, cornered by their own lies. When the chairman left, Priya turned on me like a storm. "This is your revenge, isn't it?" she screamed. "You couldn't handle losing control of this house." I met her eyes. "You wanted the house. You tried to take it without honor. This is not revenge, it's consequence." Her hands trembled, rage simmering. "You think anyone will believe your sweet old lady act? You're the reason your son is being humiliated." That word, humiliated, struck deep. Not because it wasn't true, but because I could see how little remorse she had. It wasn't about what they'd done, only that they'd been caught. Later that night, Arjun came to my room. He looked exhausted, his face older than his years. "Ma," he said quietly, "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I replied, folding my shawl neatly. He sat on the edge of my bed. "I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. Priya said you'd be happier in a quieter place. She said it'd free up money for our business." "And did you ever ask me?" He looked down. "No." Silence stretched between us. The kind that holds every unsaid thing, disappointment, regret, lost affection. "I made a mistake," he whispered finally. "No, Beta," I said softly. "You made many. But admitting one is a start." His eyes glistened. "Will you forgive me?" I sighed, feeling both relief and sorrow. "Forgiveness isn't a word, Arjun. It's a process. And it begins with truth." He nodded, ashamed. I'll cooperate with the investigation. For your sake, I said gently, I hope you do it for more than that. The next week brought more public fallout. The registrar's office confirmed the documents were fake, signed using scanned copies of my old ID and forged seals. Priya was summoned for further questioning. When she returned that evening, she was pale. They might file a case, she muttered, sitting heavily on the sofa. They have all the evidence. Arjun looked at her, helpless. What will we do now? She glared at him. Don't we me. You're the one who backed out halfway. Their marriage, once loud with laughter and plans, now echoed with blame. Word spread quickly. Relatives who hadn't called in years began messaging me, some out of sympathy, others just to gossip. But among all those voices, one message stood out, from my niece, Asha, who lived 2 cities away. Masi, I saw your story in the paper. I'm proud of you. You've always been the strongest woman I know. I read that message 3 times. It made my eyes sting. For the first time in months, I felt seen, not as a burden, but as a woman who'd stood her ground. Then came the society meeting. I hadn't planned to attend, but when the chairman announced that the issue would be discussed, I felt compelled to go. The hall was packed. Residents whispered as we walked in, me, my son, and Priya. The chairman cleared his throat. Before we begin, I'd like to address the matter concerning house number 14 and the property dispute. Mrs. Kamla Sharma, would you like to say something? I stood up slowly. My sorry was plain, my voice calm. For years, I began, this house has seen laughter, love, and even loss. My husband and I built it with our hands, brick by brick. It was never just property, it was memory. I paused, scanning the room. But when people value greed over gratitude, even memories become targets. A murmur rippled through the audience. I'm not here to shame anyone, I continued softly. I'm here to remind every son and daughter that a mother's home is not just her shelter, it's her identity. When you take that away, you don't gain wealth. You lose your soul. Silence followed, thick and heavy. When I sat down, I saw Priya's face twisted with something I couldn't name, anger maybe. Or guilt. Arjun kept his eyes down. But the applause that followed, it was quiet at first, then grew stronger. It wasn't celebration, it was respect. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace touch the edges of my heart. After the meeting, the chairman approached me privately. Madam, the community is with you. And if you ever need assistance, my wife and I would be happy to help. I thanked him politely. But inside, I felt something else. Not pride, not victory. Just quiet clarity. Justice was never about punishing them. It was about reclaiming myself. After the society meeting, life didn't change overnight, not in the way people imagine. There were no grand apologies, no sudden harmony at the dinner table. But silence began to soften. My son stopped avoiding me. He still couldn't look me fully in the eye, but he began doing small things, leaving tea by my bedside in the morning, offering to drive me to the market, fixing the old radio his father used to love. Each gesture was wordless, but I understood. Sometimes remorse doesn't speak, it acts quietly. Priya, however, remained distant. She didn't shout anymore. She didn't have to. Her coldness said enough. The woman who once controlled every corner of the house now avoided my presence entirely. One evening, as I was folding laundry, she walked into my room. Her eyes were puffy, her expression drained of the sharpness she once carried like a weapon. Ma, she began, voice low, I've been called in again tomorrow. They said I might face charges. I looked up at her, but said nothing. She hesitated, then continued, I know what I did was wrong. I thought, if we could sell the house, we'd finally live the life we wanted. I didn't think about you. I only thought about myself. There was no anger in her tone, only exhaustion. Do you want forgiveness? I asked softly. She swallowed hard. I don't know. I can't live with this guilt anymore. I put down the folded cloth and sighed. Priya, guilt only leaves when you make amends. What you did can't be erased, but it can be understood, if you choose to change. Her eyes glistened. And if you can't forgive me? I shook my head gently. Then learn to forgive yourself first. The rest will follow. She nodded, quietly left, and closed the door behind her. That night, for the first time, I prayed not for justice, but for peace for all of us. Weeks passed. The investigation continued, but the authorities decided not to pursue a full case since I had chosen not to press charges. It wasn't mercy, it was closure. I didn't want my son's name on a criminal record, or his wife behind bars. I only wanted them to learn. And they did. Priya started a small business from home, handmade candles. The irony wasn't lost on me. She who had brought darkness now spent her days creating light. Arjun helped her with deliveries, often returning home sweaty and tired, but with something new in his eyes, humility. Sometimes, they'd invite me to sit with them at dinner. It was awkward at first. But slowly, the distance shrank. One night, as I was serving rice, Arjun placed his hand gently on mine. "Ma," he said, "thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled faintly. Mothers don't stop loving, Beta. They just stop protecting when their children forget who they are. He looked down, tears slipping silently onto his plate. A few months later, I visited my husband's grave. The sun was setting, bathing the headstone in gold. I knelt beside it and brushed away the dust. "I kept the house," I whispered. "Just like you told me." The breeze stirred the leaves, as if in approval. I sat there a while, thinking of the years gone by, the laughter, the betrayal, the quiet strength it took to survive it all. For so long, I'd seen myself as just a mother, a widow, a background figure in other people's lives. But now, I understood, I was more than that. I was a woman who endured. When I returned home that evening, the smell of fresh dal filled the air. Priya was cooking. "Dinner's ready soon," she said, almost shyly. I nodded. "Smells lovely." As we ate together, for the first time, it felt like a home again, not perfect, not painless, but whole in its own fragile way. Later, as I was heading to my room, Priya called out softly, "Ma." I turned. She hesitated, then said, "Thank you for not giving up on him or me." I smiled. It's easy to love people when they're good. The real test is when they're not. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. I thought of how far we'd come from the day she smashed my plate to this fragile piece that had found us. Sometimes, I wondered what my husband would have said if he'd seen it all. Maybe he would have laughed softly, taken my hand, and said, "You always were stronger than you believed." And maybe he'd be right. Because strength isn't in shouting or fighting back, it's in standing still when the world tries to shake you. It's in knowing that dignity doesn't need witnesses. It's in forgiving without forgetting. The next morning, I set the table for breakfast. 3 plates. 1 family. When Priya came in, she looked hesitant, as if waiting for permission. I smiled gently. "Sit down, Beta." Her eyes filled. "Thank you, Ma." I poured her tea, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like an act of duty, it felt like healing. The house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't loneliness. It was peace. And as the morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer. I may have lost trust, but I never lost myself. Sometimes, I sit at that same dining table, the one where my daughter-in-law once smashed my plate, and I run my hand across its surface. The cracks are still there, faint but visible, like scars that never fully fade. I used to hate those cracks. They reminded me of pain, of betrayal, of the day everything broke. But now I see them differently. They are proof that even after being shattered, something can still hold together. It took me a long time to learn that peace doesn't come from punishing others. It comes from choosing not to let their actions destroy who you are. My son and his wife still have a long road ahead, rebuilding trust, learning humility. And I still have my quiet moments of sadness. But they no longer feel heavy. Because I did what every woman must do at some point in her life. I stopped waiting for someone else to protect me. I protected myself. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe someone you loved betrayed your trust, and you're wondering how to move forward. Let me tell you, you can. Not by erasing the pain, but by walking through it, step by step, until it no longer defines you. We cannot control what others do to us. But we can choose who we become after they do it. So tell me if you were in my place. Would you have exposed them, or would you have forgiven and let go? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if my story touched you, please remember to subscribe and share. Because sometimes, the stories we tell aren't just about what happened. They're about reminding each other that no matter how deeply we're hurt, we can always find our way back to dignity, to peace, and to ourselves. Sparkles, thank you for listening. This was my story, and maybe, in some way, it's yours too.